from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu.
We meet to meet again. Welcome to the Friday edition of Balance of Power. As Iran says it has agreed with the U.S. to continue talks to de-escalate and avoid a military confrontation. We'll get the latest in a moment from Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall with insights ahead from Hagar Chemali from Greenwich Media Strategies. Raphael Bostic weighing in on Fed independence, as we'll discuss with Bloomberg Wall Street Week host David Westin, and we'll have analysis from our political panel, all after a look at Wall Street. Let's get up to date with Charlie Pellet at World Headquarters in New York. Recovery Day, Charlie.
Indeed, we are seeing a renewed round of dip buying. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all pushing higher. I'm going to begin with Bitcoin because right now we have got Bitcoin surging by 12.1%, back above 70,717 on Bitcoin. All of this as the Dow now surges by more than 1,000 points on this Friday. We've got the Dow up 1,050 right now, up 2.1%, 49,958. Looking at a record on the Dow. We've got the S&P up 116, up 1.7%. NASDAQ up 455 points. NASDAQ is surging by 2%. The NASDAQ 100 index up 1.9%. And people getting back into small caps with the Russell 2000 index advancing 3.3%. Our Mag 7 index has turned around, up by 0.6%. The VIX now at 17. This time yesterday we had a VIX above 20. The 10-year yielding 4.21%, with the 2-year 3.49%. Gold is surging 3.8%. Spot gold 49.62 the ounce. Silver up 9.5%, 77.63 on silver. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.5%, now 64.22 a barrel. Again, Bitcoin up 12.1%, $70,700 on Bitcoin. Amazon shares are down 6.1% now after the company last night announced plans to spend $200 billion this year on data centers, chips, and other equipment. And Homebuilder stocks are falling on news of the Trump administration is exploring opening an antitrust investigation into U.S. companies amid rising focus on the country's housing affordability crisis. Among some of the housing names selling off, D.R. Horton down now by 2%, Pulte down by 0.4%, Lennar down by 1.8%, the luxury homebuilder Toll holding on to gains of 0.7%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcast. I'm Charlie Pellet. That Joe Mathieu is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thank you so much. Almost like yesterday never happened. Charlie will have more on this improved market today in about 20 minutes' time as part of our program. Live from Washington, thanks for being with us on the Friday edition of Balance of Power. As we survey the political landscape here at the threshold of the weekend with important talks underway in Oman. We talked about this yesterday as the venue changed from Turkey. U.S.-Iran talks aimed at a nuclear deal, or maybe I should say aimed at avoiding military strikes once again from the U.S. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt spoke to this during the briefing yesterday. Listen.
The president has obviously been quite clear in his demands of the Iranian regime. Zero nuclear capability is something he's been very explicit about, and he wants to see if a deal can be struck. And while these negotiations are taking place, I would remind the Iranian regime that the president has many options at his disposal, aside from diplomacy, as the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military.
Remembering that Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are back at the table in this case, back at the table in Oman. And we're waiting for more details on what exactly was discussed or, in fact, accomplished, with Iran saying that the talks had a good start. We're agreeing to meet again. Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall is with us right now with the latest on this. Do we expect a readout, Tyler, or are we just watching Truth Social?
Well, at this point, we haven't heard from the U.S. side, but as you mentioned, we did hear from Iran, which essentially laid out that the talks agreed to more talks to come. They called this very productive, very good talks, in the words of the Iranian foreign minister. You mentioned Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. I will point out somebody else was there from the U.S. delegation, U.S. Navy Admiral Brad Cooper, the head of of the American military's Central Command. That has led some analysts to say that was perhaps a threat of keeping in mind that military action is still on the table. The fact that such a high-level, high-ranking military official was there in person for these talks, because as you just heard from the White House press secretary, the U.S. maintains that while diplomacy is on the table, there are a lot of other likely actions that could also be on the table. In fact, our own analysts at Bloomberg Economics have said that they see it as highly likely that the U.S. could still strike Iran even as diplomacy moves ahead. And this was considered to be a welcome sign that we heard from Iran that they went well and they're going to continue talking. But we should also point out that both sides seem to have contrasting parameters heading into today. You mentioned the venue change, but also Iran was able to limit the scope of these talks, according to our reporting. Bilateral talks only focused on Iran's nuclear program, whereas, Joe, we know that the U.S. wanted to expand that out. They wanted to have Iran's ballistic missile program on the table, also talk about their support for proxy militia groups, not to mention that they wanted regional partners in the room, too, to talk about how there could be broader stability in the region.
And I guess the U.S. was urged by a number of neighbors in the region to acquiesce to Iran's demands in this case. Is the fear of a strike that high?
Well, if you look at some of the lead up to these talks, I think that did raise the prospect of fear. We've seen this massive buildup of U.S. military assets in the region. That is actually part of why our own analysts are saying strikes could be likely, because we've already seen this accumulation when it comes to like the USS Lincoln Carrier Strike Group and some more of this armada that is now assembled in the Arabian Sea. With that said, there's still a lot of options on what military action could look like. Just because there's such a buildup of power, that doesn't mean that there could be a large-scale strike. We could see targeted strikes, for example, and that will sort of play with the different scenarios that end up resulting from this, particularly when it comes to the oil market. How big this strike would ultimately be, if Iran retaliates in such a way that would hinder the oil market, such as closing the Strait of Hormuz as one example. There's so many different range of possibilities that could happen. But if you ask the White House, as you just heard, diplomacy is still on the table. It's
interesting to think that this started as a conversation about protesters. The president remember, help was on the way. He said that if they execute the protesters, the United States would strike. And he told reporters yesterday that we had their back. Are we talking about protests anymore at this point? Well,
so you're hearing the rhetoric from the president, but now it's starting to shift back to this has to be just about Iran's nuclear program. Yes. And we got a preview from an interview that's airing over the weekend with President Trump on NBC News, where he was asked directly, you've said that Iran's nuclear program was obliterated. Why are we still talking about this? And while we know significant damage was made when it comes to their program, President Trump is saying that they have this intelligence that Iran is rebuilding in a different location. And that is why it appears that we've seen this ramp up of escalation and tensions in the region. As just this week, Joe, you know, the U.S. confirmed it shot down a drone that appeared to be headed for the USS Lincoln Carrier Strike Group. We also know that Iranian gunboats were trying to board a U.S.-flagged oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. So there has been just so much pressure leading up to these highly anticipated talks today.
Gunboat diplomacy, as we continue to hear. Tyler, thank you so much. Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall with us live in Washington. We're going to be hearing, of course, from the president, as Tyler mentioned, during the Super Bowl. That's part of the annual tradition. And it is expected that we might learn more when he is doing some signing later on today in the White House. There is an event in the Oval Office. We'll see if it's open to reporters. But we want to keep the conversation going here with Hagar Chemali, who knows a lot about this part of the world and has been a voice of reason for any number of conflicts that we have talked about in the last couple of years. Former director for Syria and Lebanon on the National Security Council, CEO, founder, Greenwich Media Strategies. Hagar, it's great to have you back as we watch the justification for military action evolve and then the parallel path of diplomacy. Which do you think is more likely?
Well, I certainly wouldn't discount either of them. Is, you know, and the reporter before mentioned that really is that just because there are diplomatic talks, it doesn't mean that military strikes can't happen. On the contrary, when it comes to the talks that are happening and apparently they've agreed to another round, it's the U.S. side that is much less likely to be certain to engage in a way that is going to get anywhere. And the reason for that is that the Iranian regime has proven time and again that it is not willing to actually negotiate regarding its nuclear program or anything regarding its ballistic missile program, its support for terrorism, and its human rights abuses in a way that is actually going to work on a level that is where the U.S. administration needs it to be. I know that in the administration and in Washington, they would like to see nothing more than this regime to go. It just needs to be in a way that paves the path for something stable afterward. They don't want to enter into a situation like Iraq. They also don't want anybody, they don't want them to have a nuclear weapon. I don't love that the focus has become talk about the nuclear program. I think that's actually quite detrimental for a lot of reasons, mainly for the Iranian protesters. But that said, Trump has come out and said fundamentally, and this is fundamentally the issue for them, is if they appear to be rebuilding a nuclear program, if they appear to be intent on building a nuclear weapon, then that's really going to be the no-go for them. So I would expect some strikes. When or how is unclear, but it's clear to me that Armada is there for a reason, and also that if it doesn't happen now, and these talks fall apart, those strikes are likely to happen at some point in the future. Just as, by the way, I believe the regime is going to fall at some point in the future because it doesn't have an economic leg to stand on.
Mm-hmm. Boy, that's really interesting. Where do the proxies come in with all of this, Hagar? Will we be getting Houthi attacks from Yemen if it appears that we're on the march to war?
Probably, but it won't be that different than what we've seen over the last 2 years. And this is why I'm a little bit confused by the pushback by the Gulf. The Gulf leaders who really weighed in heavily to make this meeting happen. It was originally supposed to happen in Turkey. As was mentioned before, it got pushed to Oman. It got pushed to terms that are much more favorable for the Iranian regime in terms of what they wanted. And that's the Gulf leaders that really pushed the U.S. administration on that. And some of that is because the Gulf really prides itself on a general state of stability. And it's why they didn't like when Israel struck Doha, for example, right? They really view that as this is a bastion of stability in this region. This is what has led to our success. And so we don't want this kind of upheaval and instability. But the fact is that over the last 2 years, every time you've had ramp up or tensions that have increased or actual kinetic action, the fact is it's always been very limited. These are limited military operations. There have been threats. The U.S. has very successfully pushed back or prevented those threats or protected against them. And by the way, this comes at a time when the Iranian regime has never been weaker. We and the Israelis literally own their skies. They have no defense missile capabilities anymore. And they also have, if their nuclear program hasn't been obliterated, a large chunk of it has been destroyed. And so to speak as though the regime is in any way in a position of strength, I find very disturbing. And we should certainly not let the regime feel that way. But I do understand the argument that whatever we do in Iran, that we want to make sure that if the regime collapses, that the IRGC doesn't take over, because then it would be markedly worse. And I understand that argument, and I do think that that's something that's manageable. But that's where I see when I hear that talk, I'm not as worried about those threats. They've come up, we've managed them before. Now would be no different.
We're hearing from Jennifer Griffin at Fox that Iran says the talks lasted 8 hours. Hagar, is that encouraging? And why haven't we heard a readout from the U.S. side?
Well, 8 hours is encouraging. It's not surprising for talks of this kind and the amount, the extent to which they need to discuss. The Iranian regime is showing that it absolutely wants some kind of deal. And the reason is because it does feel as though it's really crumbling. And so now they're desperate. But in terms of a readout from the United States, this administration, in particular, the Trump administration, when they pursue their talks, I have found that in general, as a pattern, they don't tend to share too much with the public because they don't want the public in general, whether it is the regime that's listening or us sitting in the United States, understanding their next move, analyzing the next move, knowing what it could be. That unpredictability serves in the interests of the administration. And so I don't expect us to get much of a readout beyond what we know now, which is that there will be talks again, that the U.S. reserves the right for kinetic action, that they're going to continue sticking to their demands. But I don't think we're going to get much detail beyond that.
As a former diplomat, I wonder your thoughts on Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner being at every table, whether it's talking to Vladimir Putin or, in this case, face-to-face with the Iranians for 8 hours. Are they the right people to be in this room?
This is the second time I got this question today. The thing is, it's not really my place to decide whether or not they're right or wrong. The fact is that President Trump really depends on them and has given them this mandate, and Steve Witkoff in particular, right? I mean, Steve Witkoff is officially with the administration as a special envoy and has already brokered deals. I mean, the Israel-Gaza one with Jared Kushner, of course, is a success. However you want to look at it, the war ended and the hostages were released. So they were able to achieve success there. They were not able to achieve success yet, at least, on Russia-Ukraine, and actually made some missteps there that Secretary Rubio had to kind of clean up and fix. And so it remains to be seen what they're going to be able to achieve on this one. I will tell you that this corner of the world, understanding the regime, its history, how it came to power, what its foreign policy objectives are, and that it is a regime that will never change its foreign policy objectives. It is fundamental. Pursuing terrorism and its nuclear program is fundamental to the regime's existence. Why? Because when it came to power in 1979, it came to power arguing that they needed to fight the West and the quote-unquote oppressor, and that Islam was the way to do it. And that is why the way they fashion their support for terrorism, their Islamic extremism, their oppression is literally fundamental to their existence. And that's why no deal has ever changed their behavior. And you do need real experts of the region to understand that. But that said, I also think there's always value in having perspectives of, business people and the way they pursue deals. I do think that can be helpful. At the end of the day, it's, Trump has definitely, he has a lot of faith in Witkoff and has had that faith over the last year or so in these deals. So it'll remain to be seen, but I really don't think it's them alone anyway. Yeah.
I don't mean to sound too old-fashioned, Hagar, but I'm just wondering if there's anything left of the old Olympic truce. Opening ceremonies are taking place today. Doesn't that call for a halting of hostilities around the world for the next couple of weeks?
If only, Joe, we lived in a pacifist world where nefarious actors weren't seeking war all the time. I wish that were the case. I will tell you that the thing that I think is the point that's being missed in what I see in the talks regarding the regime, regarding its nuclear talks, is really the fact that when I say that this regime has no economic leg to stand on, I cannot emphasize that enough. One of its major banks blew up in December, Ayanda Bank. That is what led to mass inflation, and the Iranian regime absorbed the bank, printed money, led to mass inflation. That is what led to the protests. And there are 5 other banks that are about to implode in Iran. And unlike the United States, when this happened in 2008, we're the United States. We were able to take care of that and fund that. Iran can't. And so this regime could very well fall regardless of kinetic action. And so the conversation needs to be about, what do we do with the day after? How do we ensure that there is a stable transition, that the IRGC doesn't take over? Because when they're not going to be able to pay their own people, that's really when you see the potential for regime collapse. And that is an opportunity for the entire world. So that's the conversation I hope they're having. And I know that the administration is interested in the regime no longer being there. So that it's going to be, we'll see. But that said, sure, all of this leads to peace is what I would say, Joe. The regime falling, however it happens, leads to peace.
The view from Hagar Chemali. Thank you, Hagar. It's great to have you with us as part of the conversation today on Balance of Power. We'll let you know when we hear from the White House on that 8-hour session. I'm Joe Mathieu. This is Bloomberg. It was only a couple of days ago that Scott Bessent began his testimony on Capitol Hill, and he faced some pretty wild questions. In some cases, he brought his own Oppo research to tangle with lawmakers who were on the other side of the panel. When he got to the Senate Banking Committee, Senator Elizabeth Warren making some news with the secretary, who said it would be up to the president to decide if he wants to sue his nominee to chair the Federal Reserve for not lowering interest rates to his liking. Elizabeth Warren saying, I thought that was the softball. And it generated a lot of news here on the terminal and on Bloomberg TV and radio with questions about the Fed's mission, mission creep, DEI, and so forth. All of this came up in Michael Mckee's conversation with outgoing Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic on Bloomberg TV and radio. Let's put an ear and an eye on what they said.
I actually don't even see the mission creep argument. Like for me, on the banking side, for example, our job is to make sure that every bank that's alive today is alive tomorrow. And so we need to make sure that banks are thinking about the risks that could cause them to need to deploy capital in ways other than in loans. And so having conversations about those things, I think, is fully appropriate, and we should be doing that. We don't tell banks where to lend. I've never told a bank, don't do a loan or don't do that sort of thing, and my examiners don't as well. I think we're asking prudent questions to make sure that financial sector, business leaders are aware of trends that could be introducing risk.
What would you tell Donald Trump if you had the opportunity about Jay Powell and about the Fed?
I'd say Jay's trying to do the best that he can. He's a smart man. He understands markets. And if you want him to succeed, you should let him succeed.
Well, the Fed itself, do you think it is under threat from this administration?
Threat, I don't know. What I would say is my whole time here, and I think that most of the history of the Fed, there have been people who thought the Fed should do other things and talked about that and called them out. This is another one of those times. And we need to be mindful and we need to be solid and resolute to understand that that comes with the territory, and with that territory then requires our strength and our resoluteness to stay focused on what we've been asked to do.
Raphael Bostic, however diplomatic, the Atlanta Fed president's talking with Michael Mckee. You can see the full conversation, their full interview, coming up on Bloomberg Wall Street Week, 6 p.m. Wall Street time. And, of course, the force behind that program is David Westin, and our colleague from New York joins us right now. David, it's great to see you. There's been a big, spirited debate, I guess we could call it, here in Washington about Fed independence. But it almost becomes a question of how we define it, because President Trump has changed the rules here, hasn't he?
Well, he says he hasn't, right? I mean, his Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, keeps saying, no, the president respects the Fed. And then the president comes out and either posts something on True Social, otherwise talks in ways that perhaps is not so independent. At the same time, this sounds like more talk right now than actual action. I mean, we have to admit that he's appointing somebody in Kevin Warsh that he thinks will do things that he would like to have done. But that's different from telling the Fed president what to do as opposed to appointing somebody who's inclined in your direction.
Sure. Then again, if you're tacitly threatening to sue over interest rate decisions, that could be seen as something different, no?
Well, certainly. And listen, we're hearing a lot of things out of this president I don't think we would have heard from other presidents. But I do note, and you're following this more closely than I am, Joe, you're starting to hear even from Republicans up on the Hill, people like Tim Scott, who are making some noises to say, well, wait a second, let's back off here a little bit. I'm not sure there's any crime that should be investigated, for example, with respect to Chair Powell. So there seems to be a point at which even Republicans on the Hill say that's enough. I mean, I think everybody at some level understands the importance of the independence of the Fed. And thus far, I would say, at least, and I'm not an expert on the markets, but the market's not overly reacting. I mean, you're not seeing the 10-year yields shoot up, and you're not seeing, goodness knows, the stock market today shooting down. So thus far, I think it's been more talk rather than action.
Well, it's interesting. Tom Tillis has become the face of that Republican opposition in the Senate. But you're right. It's not just the retiring senator from North Carolina. We heard from a number of other lawmakers. John Thune's pushed back on this as well, where we really kind of found a line. And I'm wondering what you think that means for confirmation. Will the committee even hold a hearing until this case magically goes away?
Well, there's a good question, right? Because as I recall, Senator Tillis said that was not going to happen until it had gone away. I also wonder what is going on with the Attorney General, who may be feeling a little bit of pressure here, because President Trump at least claimed that he didn't even know it was happening before it happened, this subpoena. And also, Joe, as you know so well, it's a subpoena from a grand jury. It's not even an indictment. I mean, it's a really early stage here. But I wonder what kind of pressure there may be on the Attorney General, Ms. Pirro, to say, well, maybe you better back off of this a little bit, Madam Attorney General.
No doubt. Spending time with David Westin, who, of course, I'll remind you, is not only America's anchorman at Bloomberg TV, but he used to work in a very different capacity in the news business and was president of ABC News for some time. David, I'm just wondering your thoughts on what is happening in the news media, not just the splintering that we've been seeing, but the massive rounds of layoffs. This week, the Washington Post was the example. A third of the newsroom dismissed. David, they even axed the entire sports section while they were at it. There seems to be a major rethink on how journalism is supposed to make money right now.
Boy, Joe, you put your finger on it with the sports section for the Washington Post. I lived in Washington for many years, and that was a really iconic sports section they had at the Washington Post. And by the way, even going back before that, the Washington Post was known for its political coverage, and then you had people leave to form Politico. So a couple of the major franchises of that newspaper, which would have been politics and sports, have really been diminished or even eliminated. I'd have to say, just personally, I think it's all sad. But it's part of a larger piece here with what's happened to American newspapers overall, with a couple of notable exceptions. I mean, you look at the Los Angeles Times, you look at the Chicago Tribune, you look at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. You've seen this happen again and again and again. And the playbook seems to be, okay, we're going to pull back from print, we're going to go online. But an inevitable part of that is cutting way back on the staff. And you don't want to see anybody lose their jobs. But when you're talking about staff for these newspapers, you're talking about reporters, and that has to be reflected in the quality of the reporting being done. And I at least don't yet see other institutions stepping up to have dedicated reporters, beat reporters on important subjects reporting for us. So I must say, for the Republic, and forget it as a journalist, as for the Republic, I worry about what it does for our democracy.
Well, yeah, think about the number of scandals that have not been uncovered since local newsrooms cleared out their court reporters and their police blotter reporters. David, we're living in a different world here, but I appreciate your weighing in on it. David Westin, the host of Bloomberg Wall Street Week. We'll be watching, as always, 6 p.m. Eastern time after Balance of Power. David, have a great weekend, and thanks for bringing that conversation to us. Let's assemble our panel for their thoughts on this and more. Bloomberg Politics contributor Rick Davis is with us, partner at Stonecourt Capital, Republican strategist alongside Meghan Hayes, a former special assistant to President Biden, our Democratic strategist. Great to have both of you with us. Meghan, what does this mean for the Capitol here? This is obviously our city's newspaper, but it's also a global news outlet, one, of course, that is owned by Jeff Bezos, who put a lot of money into the Melania film. And that's what we've been hearing, is a lot of question marks about where the spending priorities are in this organization. Is this a disservice to journalism?
I think so. I mean, I think that taking away all of these newspapers' ability to report the news and to have actual stories for people to read is a real disservice. People that live across America don't understand or don't know what's going on because we're not getting the reporting out of Capitol Hill or the White House that we used to. I do think the spending piece is an interesting one and should probably be probed, but I think people saw this coming when Jeff Bezos took over for the newspaper.
How come?
I just think you see his priorities shifting. He was with Pete Hegseth just a couple of days ago doing something with one of his other businesses. He's spent $75 million on a documentary for Melania. So I'm not sure that the Washington, and you saw it when they pulled back the endorsement for Kamala Harris last year. You saw his priorities starting to shift here, and then the newspaper's priorities starting to shift.
Well, I don't know your thoughts on this, Rick. Obviously, the Washington Post has its own business matters, its own financial challenges. But you could suggest that we're missing a lot by not having an active newsroom. And I'll add that they pulled back on a number of metro positions as well. This is a time where journalism has been demonized by the administration, and I wonder if people feel the impact of this as consumers.
Yeah, I certainly am very concerned about it. I mean, and they're getting rid of their sports page. I mean, how many times do you look in the sports page to see your team's success or, read about its failures? Some of the great writers, Boswell and others, who covered Washington sports for decades became household names. Look, this has been happening for a long time. Local media outlets all over the country have been failing. You'd be hard-pressed to find a local paper, as you pointed out, either covering town hall or sports or any other activities in their communities. And frankly, what has replaced that is the rise of, single ideology, aggregator websites and things like that, you just really don't know where that news is coming from or what the point of view is. And so I'm less concerned about wealthy people buying newspapers. Wealthy people have always bought newspapers. I mean, the New York Times, the LA Times, Washington Post. I mean, all the great
Chicago Tribune
newspaper families were wealthy families. So what's the difference? Everyone always had a point of view. This isn't the first time we've seen newspapers with an ideology, but at least we had newspapers. Now, that ideology, is that killing the newspapers or what? So lots changed. I think it is a threat to the kinds of communications and democracy that we have. So, let's do a big project to figure out how to communicate, how to report news, facts to the American people.
Boy, refreshing ideas from both Rick Davis and Meghan Hayes. You guys both anyone get the hard copy Sunday paper anymore? Do you get the Sunday? No, nobody does. They just used to spread it out on the table, spend all morning. Things have changed a lot. Thanks to our great panel, Meghan Hayes and Rick Davis. Coming up, we'll have much more here on Balance of Power, live from Washington on Bloomberg TV and radio, as we turn our attention to some of the other top stories in town here and get ready for the Super Bowl. Derek Stevens from Circa, live from Vegas, is coming up next on Bloomberg. Just noticing on Twitter, another retirement in the House of Representatives, a Republican retirement just announced by Mark Amodei of Nevada. Writing, "Serving the people of Nevada has been the honor of my lifetime. Please see statement below." And there you have the announcement of the retirement. "Thank you for the honor. Every achievement worth doing began with listening to Nevadans and fighting for our values." Threatening the Republican margin evermore as we make our way into this midterm election cycle. Another fascinating turn as we consider the balance of power in the United States House. Incidentally, we're going to bring you to Nevada in just a moment when we talk to Derek Stevens, making his triumphant return here to Balance of Power on this Super Bowl weekend. We're going to get a good sense of what's going to be happening at Stadium Swim, Circa, and the rest of Fremont Street that he owns. But as Charlie mentioned, I just quickly want to delve into what's happening here in the markets with Norah Mulinda. This downturn that we're seeing in Homebuilders is pretty severe, and it's coming straight from the White House as a potential antitrust action is invoked by the administration. Norah, this is not playing well with most of the homebuilders today. What are you seeing in New York?
Yeah, Joe, not really playing well with the home builders. I'm looking at an index, S15 Home, that tracks a lot of the biggest U.S. publicly traded home builders in the United States. And we are seeing shares of that index. We're looking at it down just below flat. So we are seeing it pairing some of the deeper declines that we did see earlier in the session here. But really what the focus is right now for the Trump administration is on affordability. I mean, we know that's what's been on the mind of a lot of voters right now. So you're certainly seeing Trump coming in here, the administration more broadly, trying to crack down on the housing market and find a way to make it a bit more affordable. That's what they're really laying out here. We just had a couple days ago just talking about Trump homes. We've been talking about the 50-year mortgage that was floated not too long ago, but also just thinking about how he can really appeal to voters in this time period and the average consumer, given the fact that we do know that the housing market is really fractured right now. It's actually seeing the highest, most expensive homes in more than decades. But I mean, we do look at the mortgage rate. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate in the U.S. is now sitting around 6%. So not as high as it was before, but still very steep for those who are looking to purchase a new home.
Interesting. You know, it's really amazing when you look at this bounce back today, just broadly here, Norah. I mean, we've made up a lot of ground. In some cases, we've more than made up for the losses that were seen yesterday in stocks. In the broad market, the RSPs of the world, the equal weight S&P 500, sitting at new all-time highs today. It depends on what corner of the market you're looking at here, doesn't it?
Definitely. I mean, we are seeing a bit of a different story here. I mean, what I've really got my eyes on has been the tech space this entire week. I mean, we are seeing a rebound in software stocks because that's where our attention has been much of this week, because we were earlier seeing declines. I mean, we also saw Bitcoin, a brutal sell-off that we saw yesterday, but we are also seeing that the coin is reclaiming almost all of its losses that we did see. This, of course, this plunge was one of the worst that we've seen since Sam Bankman-Fried's collapse of FTX just about 3 years ago. So it's interesting to see the coin recouping its losses, but also just seeing a bit more broad, can we even call it optimism right now? The S&P 500 up about 1.7%, but you're certainly seeing a bit of a turn in the market as we head toward the close of the week.
Let's see if we can hang in there. Norah, thank you so much. Norah Mulinda, live from New York. We'll have much more on the markets, as I mentioned, when Charlie Pellet gets back here in just about 15 minutes' time. It's Balance of Power in Washington, D.C., and I've been looking forward to this one. As the president gets ready to jump on Air Force One to watch the Super Bowl at the big party in Mar-a-Lago, a lot of people are headed for Las Vegas. I feel bad that producer James isn't out there right now because he's the one who turned me on to Stadium Swim. And we wanted to spend some time, do something a little bit special here with the man Forbes called the last casino mogul to get a sense of what exactly we're in store for on Sunday from the gaming perspective, from the tourism perspective, and a man who knows more about both than most. Derek Stevens, the owner of Circa, Golden Gate, the D, and the other half of Fremont Street is with us right now, live from Las Vegas. Mr. Stevens, welcome back. It's great to see you. This is, well, I guess this is your Super Bowl, isn't it? I'm wondering how you qualify a success this weekend. What is a good result for Circa Sports on a Super Bowl Sunday?
Well, Joe, great to be back. And I think I'm very happy to be back on a day that the Dow's up 1,000, S&P's up, yes. NASDAQ's up 400. I think I've been able to come on with you, and it's always been green. So that's a good start. That's the first
good
part of being a success. As far as the success here in Las Vegas, it really comes down to how the tourism goes and will the city fill up again. I think most people realize that the very best place to go in America is Las Vegas for the Super Bowl. If you're not actually going to the game, there's nothing better than Las Vegas. A great place to go. The home of Super Bowl betting. And we should have, I think, set some records here this year on legal wagering.
Yeah, well, okay, with regard to that, the American Gaming Association put a number on it. They're estimating $1.76 billion wagered on the Super Bowl this year through legal sportsbook operators in the U.S. How much of that is going through sportsbooks like yours in Las Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, quite a bit. I mean, we just took, Circa Sports just took its first $1 million bet. I'm hoping to have a few more of those here before kickoff. I'm very much hopeful that we break a legal record. And that's in light of the fact that from the illegal side or in the prediction market side, they may do more than just even the legal bookmakers do in 2026.
Wow. Look, I was blown away by this. So you're allowing bets of up to $1 million, $1 million limit on sides, the spread, the total at the counter in Las Vegas. How many guys do you think show up this weekend and plunk down $1 million before the game?
Well, I'm hoping quite a few. We've had one. I bet you are. We hope to get a few more. So, yeah, that's our limit. That's our limit when you walk in at the counter. We'll move the number after that, and we hope to get a little buyback. But overall volume, sports betting volume has been pretty strong here leading up to the game. Now we're still more than 48 hours away, and you're going to get 90% of the action is going to come in the next 48 hours.
Oh wow! So I'm looking at the Super Bowl ads, which is part of the fun for everybody here, and I see Fanatic Sportsbook is running its first ever Super Bowl commercial featuring Kendall Jenner, interestingly. You've got Colin Jost and Michael Che, and the DraftKings spot that's going to be on FanDuel's is going to have an add-on prior to kickoff that I'm sure they're spending at least 8 figures on. What's your place in the gaming universe when you're surrounded by this crush of sports gaming mobile apps? I haven't even mentioned Kalshi and the prediction markets yet. Where does a sports book like you exist?
Well, I think we all have our own niche areas. I mean, we're known for taking large bets. Circa Sports is known for really celebrating some of the bigger players. Our average bet with Circa Sports in the 6 states that we're up in is far higher than others. But that has a lot to do with the way we book. We run a low hold model. And we think that's something that has a spot within the sports betting ecosystem.
Interesting. You've, of course, got a lot of different properties, though, with different kinds of demographics and different clientele. I guess I'm wondering if you see these services, being DraftKings, FanDuel, or whatever, as competition, or if all wagering is good for business. And should these prediction markets be allowed to do sports?
Well, let me answer the first part of your question. Yeah. I love the fact that Fanatics has a Super Bowl commercial. I'm a big supporter of DraftKings and FanDuel on their legal side of their operation. And I think that's good because I think that legalized sports betting, it's good for leagues, it's good for players, it's good for players' unions, it's good for states, and it's good for problem gaming issues. So I'm a big supporter of any of the legal operators and what they can bring. It's also great for fans because there's greater engagement, so therefore it's great for media. I'm 100% supportive of the legal sports betting. Prediction markets, now that's a whole nother story here. I mean, these guys are doing an end around. They're very shrewd, no question about it. But they're not paying any state income tax. They're not paying anything into problem gambling. They're not paying a federal excise tax. You know, I realize there's a little bit of a surge of, let's support prediction markets, but I don't think that's necessarily the right long-term path here. I mean, think about it this way. If someone hijacked a truck that had nothing but big screen televisions and brought that truck into the parking lot of a Best Buy and was able to sell these TVs at half price, would we really be supporting these marauders the way it seems like it is? I don't think so. I think this is short-lived. And I think prediction markets have a great spot in America, in our economy, in our ecosystem. But what they're doing with sports betting, it's a little bit crazy with the amount of taxes that we pay and the amount of regulatory environment that we're in.
Marauders, says Derek Stevens. This is fascinating, not to mention the taxes that the players are paying. We talked about the Fair Bet Act last time you were here, Derek. This still has yet to see the light of day. I know Dina Titus has been working hard on this to essentially restore the 100% deduction for gambling losses against winnings. What are you hearing about this?
Yeah, I know. Dina's still working on it. The Fair Bet Act is something we still need to get done. We tried to get it done before the end of the year. Dina tried to get it done here at the end of February. We're at the end of January. It's still a top priority. And here's the thing: it's not political. It's just not political. This is something that both sides of the aisle want to do. I'm still very confident that this is going to get rectified. Unfortunately, it hasn't been rectified yet. So I'm hopeful that this gets completed. But, you know, on the tax element, you know what's amazing to me? I want to go back to this prediction market thing for a second. The state of New York collected $1.1 billion of sports betting taxes. The state of Illinois, $400 million of sports betting tax. And in prediction markets, those go to zero. I'm a little surprised that the states aren't getting more aggressive. Now I realize we're still early on in this, but I do think the legal sports betting operators provide a lot of benefit to the sports betting ecosystem. And I just think the amount of taxes being avoided by the prediction markets, it's short-lived.
Well, it's really interesting to hear you weigh in on this ahead of this weekend of all weekends. I've only got a minute left. Derek, you know, a lot of the chatter in the media has been tied to a tourism slowdown at the big resort casinos on the Strip. Are you seeing that on Fremont Street, or are people finding a good time to be more affordable at your properties?
You know, I think we've all talked a lot about this K-shaped economy. All tourism destinations in the country, New York, Miami, Las Vegas, Honolulu, is down from international tourism. But overall, Las Vegas is doing all right. I mean, Las Vegas set an all-time record. Gaming revenue set an all-time record at $15.8 billion last year. So it's still pretty strong. The unfortunate thing is it's at the lower end where I think we're starting to feel it a little bit. But yet 2026, all the predictions look very, very solid for Las Vegas tourism.
Fascinating. Leave it to the president CEO of Circa to weigh in on affordability, on the stock market, of course, gambling, and the K-shaped economy. You got to come back for our next Fed special, Derek. It's great to see you. I wish you a lot of success this weekend and all the people who are playing out there. Derek Stevens, Circa, live from Las Vegas, only here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.